Aston Martin Formula 1 team still has a cool ring to it. And yes, next season 2021, even though the new rules and regulations have been delayed until 2022, Aston are still joining the grid next season. Awesome, something to really look forward to. And whilst I like Racing Point, having a world-class supercar brand on the grid, very spicy indeed. However, a story that broke over the weekend, at first I wasn't too sure whether to cover it or not, but I've looked into it a little bit deeper and I think there's a little bit more to analyse than meets the eye. If you missed that story, well, Mercedes team principal Toto Wolff has personally invested into Aston Martin, and on the surface, this appears to be an obvious contradiction to the fact he already manages Mercedes. Why would he then want to invest in a rival Formula 1 team? And that's kind of where these clickbaity headlines have come from, and I hope I can be sensible enough to come up with a title that still does well but isn't as clickbaity as some of the others. Sorry if I haven't, I will try my very best. But anyway, I want to discuss this topic because whilst it seems on the surface like Wolff may be investing, may potentially be thinking about a move away from Mercedes to Aston Martin, I don't think it's quite as dramatic as people are saying. I've had a look at the numbers, and Toto Wolff last Friday invested in over 17 million shares in Aston Martin, equating to about 5% of the total shares in the company. Now, there's been a rights issue since he acquired these shares, meaning that by the end of today, Monday, that should only be down to 0.95. So in the grand scheme of things, it's not a lot. It's still worth a lot, but he won't have much say at all in what the company does on a day-to-day basis. Now, you might be wondering, well, why has Wolff decided to invest just randomly out of the blue in Aston Martin? And actually, that's not as complex as it might seem as well. Wolff already owns 30% of Mercedes. Obviously, he's the manager of the Mercedes Formula 1 team, but the Daimler Group he owns 30% of. So again, you might think, well, why invest in another company? Well, I can explain that for you as well, because Daimler themselves also own shares in Aston Martin. They own 5% of shares in Aston Martin. So now with Wolff's investment, that'll be 5.95, so practically 6% shares. And the reason Daimler has shares in Aston Martin is because Aston Martin are provided engines and electronics from Mercedes. So it's all a little bit complex, but what it pretty much boils down to is Mercedes supply Aston Martin with engines, with electricals, and instead of owning money or being paid out for each engine, they own a share in the company. Again, they don't have much say, but they do have a little bit of a say. Now, to make this even more complex and to swing it back around to why this is a little bit strange for Wolff himself to be investing, is that Aston Martin, as we've already discussed, are joining Formula 1 next season, and they are currently run by Lawrence Stroll, the man who owns Racing Point Formula 1 team. That's why they're evolving to Aston Martin. But Wolff himself is out of contract at Mercedes at the end of the season, and there's already been plenty of talk that he is thinking about a move on. Don't forget, he was an investor at Williams. He wasn't team principal, he wasn't chief engineer, he was just an investor at Williams. And funnily enough, he owned shares at Williams. He had to give them away once he moved to Mercedes, and that was the reason why he's ended up investing in 30% shares of Mercedes. So, is he really thinking about a move away? We'll have a talk about that in a moment. But also, Aston Martin themselves, there's a lot of talk that by Wolff investing in Aston Martin, this suggests that there's going to be a much tighter link between the Mercedes team and the Aston Martin team if Wolff does indeed stay at Mercedes, and maybe Aston Martin could become a B team of sorts, and we'll talk about that a little bit later on as well. But if you want to keep up to date with all Formula 1 news, you know what to do. Subscribe button is down below if you haven't already done so. But let's start off with Wolff, because I think that's where a lot of people will want to start, and it's kind of where I think the crux of this debate begins, because Toto Wolff and Lewis Hamilton kind of are a bit of a duo, kind of a pair. They've both said that if one of them moves on the other will as well, and they'll most likely go to the same place, which to me is why I always take the Hamilton-Ferrari rumours with a pinch of salt, because there's no denying the Wolff-Hamilton partnership is one of the best manager-driver partnerships that has ever been in Formula 1, period. Ever, ever, ever. It's so good. Hamilton and Wolff, their working relationship is insane. And it makes sense if one of them stays for the other one to stay. And whilst it would be a gamble if Wolff went to Aston Martin, it's a team I could potentially see Lewis Hamilton going to. I mean, Racing Point, or now Aston Martin, they're going to be a team that has plenty of financial backing, and they're going to be a new team in Formula 1. This isn't a team that has history. This is a team that Wolff and Hamilton could go to, make it their, especially on Hamilton's side of things, make it their final project in Formula 1 to really cement that legacy. Not that Hamilton need that anymore in Formula 1. He's a 6-time world champion, for crying out loud. But it could be his way of saying, look, I want to make another difference in Formula 1, and it might be something that Hamilton looks at in the long term and think, not only can I drive for this team, maybe I can invest myself in the potential of the team in the future. Interesting one to think about, but I'm still not too sure. Without Hamilton, let's just disregard that argument for a moment, because let's be honest, he is at Mercedes. There's no real reason he should move unless he wants a new challenge. But Wolff himself, a little bit like Hamilton, I don't really see why he'd want to move on. He's in a great position at Mercedes. They're winning everything. And I think if they were to lose next season, this season, whatever, I think Wolff is the kind of character that would want to prove that he still has the ability to get that championship back. So again, moving on seems a little bit strange. Also, Wolff has ties to the Mercedes Formula E team, which I'm not too sure he's going to give up that opportunity as well. I see it more likely he would move there than to Aston Martin. I mean, Aston Martin might be offering him millions and millions to run the team. But even then, I think Mercedes would understand what he brings to the team and would be willing to give a similar offer. So these rumours about Wolff going to Aston Martin, I personally don't buy it. I'll leave that there. However, this still means Wolff has invested in Aston Martin. And whilst his personal press release says it's only a personal financial investment, which I'm inclined to believe, his background is in finance. After all, that's where his Formula 1 career began. So it makes sense. Aston have a very close link with Mercedes. If he's going to invest in any of the Formula 1 teams, it makes sense. And don't forget, away from Formula 1, although Aston Martin were struggling, this new partnership or buyout deal they've had with Stroll, that's a great opportunity where the company isn't going to be going anywhere. You make the educated guess, even with everything going on at the moment, that's a hell of a lot of investment Stroll has been able to put into that brand, and so it makes sense. It's a safer option to invest in them than other rival sports cars and brands. So, Mercedes B team is what I also wanted to talk about today, because I've seen that being thrown around a little bit as well. We know the 2020 Racing Point car is pretty much a carbon copy of the 2019 Mercedes Formula 1 car. And the relationship between Racing Point and Mercedes has become a little bit closer over the last couple of seasons. We're not fully aware just yet whether Aston Martin will be using Mercedes engines in the 2021 season, but considering their road cars use them, Aston don't make their own engines, it would be so unlikely, so ridiculous for them to go to Honda, to Renault. They've got a very unique and special partnership already with Mercedes, so it would be silly to not take the World Championship winning engine since 2014. I mean, come on, that would be a little bit bizarre. And yes, one of their more direct competitors, McLaren, in not only a Formula 1 sense, but also a brand identity sense away from the circuit, and actually just their road cars are very similar, they're also going to Mercedes engines. Will that be a big factor? No. So, is there possibility that they could become a B team? Sure. I mean, there's been talk of Mercedes wanting a B team for quite some time now, and there's been even more talk of that B team being Williams. But we know they're a team that are very strong to keep hold of their morals. and not give away the team's history and identity to become a B team. And I really respect that. Some people think it's ridiculous, but I think it's actually quite nice for Williams to do. It's a risky strategy, and although they're at the back of the grid at the moment, I still think that's the right thing to do for them. However, for Aston Martin, they've got a completely new slate. They've never properly been in Formula 1. They did a couple of seasons all the way back in the 1950s, but nothing spectacular. They weren't race winners, they weren't championship winners. They've come back more recently as a title sponsor of Red Bull, Aston Martin Red Bull Racing, but it's not really an Aston Martin Formula 1 team. So this is a completely new team on the surface of it. Would they want to become a B team? Again, I'm not too sure. Even with those links to Mercedes, from a brand point of view, away from Formula 1 again, do they really want to be seen as the second tier to Mercedes? Considering a lot of their road cars are more expensive than Mercedes, I don't think that quite aligns. And I think although a lot of Formula 1 factors don't consider the outside consequences, I think this story is a little bit different. Again, it's a possibility. And for Lawrence Stroll, this could be a great opportunity. Mercedes are looking for a B team. Why not be them? But he is a man with a lot of money. He's a billionaire. And if anyone's going to be able to keep a team, a small team like Racing Point, alive over the next few years while we have all this economic chaos, it's going to be him. And actually, I think Williams at the moment are going to be more likely than ever to want to become a B team. And I think Stroll is insistent on proving himself in Formula 1. And I think he personally, and as a team, don't forget this team was Jordan, was Spiker. They didn't do so well, did they? But was Jordan and Force India some of the biggest underdogs in Formula 1 history? I'm not too sure they would really want to give away their own history, their fight through the years, just to become a B team. So I don't think Wolff is going to move to Aston Martin. I also don't think Aston Martin are going to become a B team. Again, I wasn't going to talk about this, but I've seen so many stories online, and I just wanted to share with you a few more details and give my thoughts on it. But as always, I'd love to know your thoughts in the comments below. If you want to keep up with what we're doing on the channel, whether it's streams, whether it's videos, on the community page each week, I'm going to be popping up what's going on each day. So if you're looking for F1 content at the moment, head over to the community page and that will sort you out. If not, and if you're new, feel free to subscribe. Thank you all very much for watching, and I hope to see you in the next one.